It's termite season.
Hi, it's me.
And bugs fear the blue trucks from Essential Pest Control.
Go blue at Essential Pest Control. We'll eliminate those bugs, bees, and termites. And stop paying too much to that national provider. Buy local for great service and affordable rates. Call Essential Pest Control because termites fear the blue.
Run for your life.
Call for the blue trucks from Essential Pest Control. 886-3029. That's 886-3029. Or check online at essentialpest.com.
This is Eb Wilkinson with Wilkinson Wealth Management, where we manage money for gun owners. What does it mean to retire comfortably and remain comfortably retired? It means designing a plan that allows you to do the things you want to do, outpace inflation, and never run out of money in your lifetime. If you want to retire comfortably and remain comfortably retired, call me, Eb Wilkinson, at 777-1911. That's 777-1911 or WilkinsonWealthMGMT.com.
I'm proud to welcome my good friends at Tucson Iron and Metal Retail to Inside Track as an advertiser. Jamie Kipper and her staff are conservation experts. They sell round and square steel tubing, metal plate and roofing materials, as well as new and used steel, aluminum, and stainless steel to ranchers, artists, interior designers, roofers, as well as you do-it-yourselfers out there. Tucson Iron and Metal Retail is open Monday through Fridays, 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., and Saturdays, 8 a.m. to noon. Tucson Iron and Steel Retail, 701 East 36th Street. Call 520-209-1576. That's 520-209-1576. Or go to TucsonIronRetail.com. Come by and be sure to ask for Jamie. Tucson Iron and Steel Retail. This is what conservation and repurposing is all about.
Welcome to Inside Track with Bruce Ash and Eb Wilkinson on the Live the Dream Media Network.
Hi from Miranda, Bruce Ash and
Eb Wilkinson.
welcome back with another action-packed Big Wednesday.
Hey, thanks for joining us today on Big Wednesday. As Bruce just said, we've got another great show for you today on Inside Track. Joining us in just a few minutes, friend of the show and Senior Vice President of the American Foreign Policy Council in Washington, D.C., Ilan Berman. We're going to be talking about what America needs to focus on. We're going to talk about what America needs to focus on in a new Arctic policy to counter the activities of Communist Chinese government in this region. In the second half of today's Big Wednesday Inside Track podcast, we'll catch up with Dr. Dan Asia, who has written a new opinion piece, American Jews Need to Change Allies. Thanks for joining us today on Live the Dream Media app or watching us on Facebook, YouTube, and many of the other platforms. To talk with us or our guest today, call 520-771-5101 or send a message to us on Live the Dream Media Facebook site.
Evan, I hope you'll continue supporting our great sponsors who help us pay the man here at Live the Dream Media. Eb's great company, Wilkinson Wealth Management. He helps my family, and he will help yours as well. Our good friend Eric Rudin at Essential Pest, his team of professionals protects all manner of pests, vermin, and weeds. I saw his one of his crew members just earlier this week, and they are still doing a great job for us. We've never had a problem. Jamie Kipper from Tucson Iron and Metal Retail and my family's 3-generation company, Paul Ash Commercial Real Estate. When you call on any of our supporters, let them know you heard about them from us at Inside Track. Yep.
Hey, we're pleased to welcome our first guest today, Ilan Berman from the American Foreign Policy Council. As an introduction to our new audience, Ilan Berman is Vice President of the American Foreign Policy Council in Washington, D.C. He's an expert on regional security in the Middle East, Central Asia, and the Russian Federation. He has consulted for both the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency and the U.S. Department of Defense and provided assistance on foreign policy and national security issues to a range of governmental agencies and congressional offices. He's been called one of America's leading experts on the Middle East and Iran by CNN. Bruce and I have called on Ilan many times during our radio days. Ilan, the American Foreign Policy Council has focused on the Middle East for many years and has recently added to its activities China and the CCP to their interest area. Welcome to our new podcast. Thanks for joining us today, Ilan.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be back. Different format, but still great to talk to you guys.
Hey, we're talking China with you this morning. Listen to these fun facts on energy production in the Arctic regions. Yet another stake is energy potential. According to the U.S. Geological Survey, the Arctic holds some 90 billion barrels of oil, 1,669 trillion feet of natural gas, and 44 billion barrels of natural liquid gas. This puts it roughly on par with Russia in terms of energy wealth. Tell our viewers why China has shown so much interest in the Arctic and why it's important to America.
Right. Well, the Arctic is sort of one of these up-and-coming regions that isn't really, at least not yet, has not been fully encompassed by great power competition between the United States and China, right? So great power competition ever since the Trump administration's first term in office, we really rebalanced the relationship and began to understand that the Chinese they weren't a responsible stakeholder. They were a predatory global actor, and they were moving around internationally in ways that were deeply detrimental to the United States in a whole bunch of domains. And so now this competition has expanded to include everything from strategic minerals to information warfare to space. But the Arctic is one of these places where we haven't really joined the battle yet, even though the Arctic has this immense energy potential. And increasingly, China, which styles itself as a near Arctic power, even though it's not anything of the sort geographically, it's not even close. But one of China's main strategic partners, Russia, it has a foothold in the Arctic, and Russia's expanding its activities there. And China's piggybacking on these activities to really expand its political profile there. And we're a little bit behind the eight ball on this. We understand the potential of the Arctic in energy terms, and President Trump in his first term, and that again, since taking office once more, has really focused on the Arctic as a source of energy for the United States, for this sort of America First energy independence policy. That's great, but that's not sufficient, because what the Chinese are doing in the Arctic and what the Russians are doing in the Arctic isn't just economic. It's also military and political. They're really expanding the region into a domain of conflict. And the longer we wait and fail to do the same, the more disadvantaged we're going to be.
So why has America failed to concentrate on this as much as China has until now?
Well, I think there's a couple of reasons, right? First of all, because the issue rubs funny against the whole question of climate change, right? In the Republican Party, there's a sort of a running gun battle on the question of climate change, and again, way beyond the scope of this interview, but it does strike me that it's hard to talk about a changing global environment, operating environment, that is caused by the opening of sea passages and things like that, if you can't even have an introductory conversation about climate change, right? Whether or not you ascribe it to any individual group or anybody's responsible. But we've been, I think, very reticent to talk about that as a whole, and it's really disadvantaged us. It's sort of left our political discourse about the Arctic really, I think, very infantile. And the reason this is important is because the climate is changing, right? We can, again, have a conversation about why and how, but the commercial traffic through the Arctic region has soared by something like 40% in the last 5-6 years. And so the more commercial traffic there is, the more commerce and goods are going through the region, the more it's important for us to make sure that those sea lanes are secure, to make sure that our adversaries globally, like Russia and China, aren't taking advantage of this commerce to our detriment.
So China's been active for many years in the Arctic. Talk about their official Arctic strategy as stated in 2018 and their alliances with Russia in the region.
Sure. Well, I mean, and China, I think for your listeners that follow Chinese foreign policy, this is going to sound very familiar, because China has all of the prerogatives of a one-party state, right? They move in unitary purpose. When the government decides something, it mobilizes all of industry and all of the state apparatus to really do something. And the Chinese almost a decade ago, planted a flag, rhetorically speaking, on the Arctic. They claimed that they were a near Arctic power. They wrote this national strategy, which talked about the need to develop the Arctic. And they style it as, for the common heritage of mankind. But what's really clear is that the Chinese are going into the region. They're piggybacking on a lot of Russian infrastructure activities, building pipelines and refurbishing ports as a way of diminishing the sovereignty of Arctic nations, right? Offering them money, trying to hammer out what in the future is going to look an awful lot like what's happening in the Indo-Pacific, where the Chinese are investing first, but then using that investment to leverage ports of call for their navy, preferential basing options, things like that. The way a friend of mine who is very sort of well-connected, very well-versed on this issue, put it to me recently is what China is doing in the region economically is the camel's nose in the tent for a larger geopolitical strategy that isn't just economic. It's also military. It's also political. And those other components, we're seeing the economic, but we're not really responding to those other components, at least not yet.
So in your Newsweek article, you wrote that China has invested $90 billion with a B in the Arctic region. What are they investing this in?
Those are the pipelines.
Well, they're investing this in infrastructure. They're investing this in technology upgrades. And by the way, what the Chinese are doing in the Arctic, if it sounds familiar, it's because it is familiar, because the Chinese aren't just doing this in the Arctic. They have a national foreign policy project called the Belt and Road. And over the last decade, they've invested somewhere between $1 and $1.8 trillion with a T in terms of building infrastructure in the developing world. What's different here is it's one thing to invest in up-and-coming countries in Latin America and Africa. That has its own set of complications. But when we're talking about the Arctic, we're also talking about areas that are geographically closer to the United States. And we're also talking about areas that implicate more of American commerce than, say, sub-Saharan Africa does. And so that's where what they're doing in this broader context of the Belt and Road becomes really important strategically for us to focus on.
Is the oil coming out of the Arctic any cleaner than that?
Sorry, I lost you on the last question. I think on the last part. I think is the oil any cleaner? I'm not an energy expert. I don't know. I can tell you that it's clean enough that we're interested in it, and it's clean enough that the Russians are interested in it. And that tells me everything I need to know about its saleability. This is not something that's really incompatible with our economy, with our cars, with our industries.
Bruce?
So welcome to the new and improved Inside Track show with Lon.
Thank you.
Be able to see on air. Can you compare China's interest in natural resources in the Arctic region with America's during the Biden administration period and now in the Trump 2.0 administration?
Right. So they're absolutely interested in Arctic energy. And in the Trump administration, in the first term, there was this opening up of ANWR, the Alaska Natural Wildlife Reserve, and there was this this executive order recently, just in the last couple of months, on expanded drilling in the Arctic. But what the administration is doing now is really trying to recover lost ground, because during the Biden administration, you had this real closing up of energy pursuits, energy exploration in the Arctic region. The Biden administration took a much more conservationist, took a much more protectionist approach to this, and didn't invest in the region as much as the Trump administration did, and as much as it's going to now in its second term in office. The problem with this is that this didn't mean, just because Biden was protectionist, didn't mean that people weren't investing in Arctic energy. They just weren't American. They were Russian and they were Chinese. And so now we're a little bit behind the times, and the administration is, I think, going to spend a lot of time trying to scramble to catch up.
In your Newsweek article, you referred to something the Chinese, you referred to before, the Chinese government calls themselves a near Arctic state. This sounds like their strategy in the South West Pacific as well, with Philippines, with Australia, with the Indonesia and so on. What should we take that description, both from an economic standpoint and maybe for this audience, an even more important thing from a defense kind of a standpoint?
Well, Bruce, as you know, I'm a recovering lawyer, so every once in a while I have to put on that hat. And so I actually see it as a legal definition because all of international law is all about jurisdiction and not jurisdiction in the way we think about state jurisdiction or federal jurisdiction here in the United States. In international law, jurisdiction is like the excuse to get involved. So China, by articulating that it's a near Arctic state, is essentially putting the international community on notice. Hey, we have interest in this region. We're going to be involved. And by the way, it's legitimate for us to be involved. It's sort of, they're laying the diplomatic predicate for everything that they're doing economically and politically. And so, I see that as a very clear sign. I think what's interesting to me is that up until now, and again, the Chinese strategy was published in 2018, so we've had quite a few years to focus on this, but there isn't really an Arctic country coordinated response. And here I'm talking about countries like Norway and Finland, countries like Canada, right? These are all stakeholders in the Arctic, and with the exception of Russia, no Arctic power is friendly with the Chinese. And yet there is no real coordinated response. And this is why I think it's really important for the Trump administration to think about this, not just in economic terms, but in strategic terms as well. As in, hey, this is a theater for cooperative action. A lot of these countries are members of NATO. In fact, all of these countries except Russia are members of NATO. Why could we not have a discussion about the High North in the context of a NATO zone of protection? Why could we not have a conversation about the need to expand our icebreaker fleet, which currently the Russians have 30. We have one functioning icebreaker. And that puts us at a real physical, technological disadvantage in terms of exploring and safeguarding the Arctic. And as I had a friend tell me a while ago, it's one thing to draft a strategy. It's another thing to buy Arctic equipment like socks and icebreakers and things like that. The Russians are doing it, and increasingly the Chinese are doing it as well, and we're not yet.
I was going to talk more about transit in this Northwest Passage region, but kind of getting back to what you said about Canada and the Scandinavian countries. Did President Trump talking about annexing Greenland help us with the strategy to open the conversation, or has it hurt us in terms of relationships with Canada, who we've also had this sort of ongoing 51st state thing? Have we helped ourselves the way we should be forming an Arctic strategy with our allies, or have we kind of maybe stumbled and tripped a little bit?
I think both. And this is really to me, this is the paradox that I'm always trying to solve for when it comes to President Trump, because President Trump has gotten all of these briefings. He has very serious people that work for him in the past and explain the importance of the Arctic, and work for him now and are explaining the importance of the Arctic and why the U.S. should get involved there. And by the way, the play for Greenland, I mean, he's hardly the first president. I think there's been 6 other times before where previous presidents have made bids for Greenland. The problem, though, is that he doesn't contextualize all of this. He just says, I want Greenland. We're going to sort of make the Greenlanders rich, and it'll be good for everybody. He doesn't explain the national security frame adequately. And as a result, it's hard for the American public to understand what he's actually trying to get at, which is a real core national security interest, especially because in Greenland, we have missile defense assets that are already deployed in Thule. And those missile defense assets are a critical part of the Golden Dome that the Trump administration is planning to erect to support the U.S. homeland, right? So all of this becomes a critical domestic interest. But the president just talks about it in the context of buying. He doesn't talk about it in the context of it being a national security interest. And I think that, frankly, that makes the job for America's diplomats harder.
Yep.
So, with the return of the Trump administration, the concept of great power competition has been something of a renaissance. To its credit, the view of China as a predatory global player that has emerged with Donald Trump in his first term was perpetuated by his successor, Joe Biden. And even so, in recent months, We've seen a strategic competition between the U.S. and China in everything from strategic minerals to trade expanded to virtually every corner of the world, except for the Arctic. It hasn't kicked off there yet. It's certainly true that the Trump administration grasped the strategic importance of the region, but with all this going on, isn't it fair to say the U.S. attention hasn't kept pace with that of the PRC?
Oh, absolutely. And I think, the point about great power competition being multi-domain is I think exactly right. And again, right, give credit where credit's due. The Biden administration didn't reverse course on this view of China that was encapsulated in the Trump administration's national security strategy, right? But President Biden talked about it in a different way. He went from great power competition to long-term strategic competition and finally ended up at managed competition. And different words have different meanings. And it became very clear that this wasn't so much a multi-domain winner-take-all contest, at least as the Biden team saw it. The question is this going to be, again, the frame that the Trump administration sees it? Because there are lots of competitive aspects to our relationship with China, right? You talked about them, right? Strategic minerals, there's space, there's telecom, there's obviously there's sort of the whole tariff dimension. All of this is hugely critical, but all of it hinges upon how the Trump administration thinks about the totality of this conflict. Are we really competing in every domain with the Chinese, or are we going to try to manage this relationship? If we default, like the Biden administration did, to managing the relationship, then maybe we don't have a strategy for the Arctic. And I think that would be a mistake, because it's very clear that the Chinese have not just economic, but political and strategic designs on that region. And frankly, what happens there is going to affect us, and it's going to affect our northern neighbor, and it's going to affect our treaty allies.
Well, Biden did not have a totality view of it. His was, we'll get this piece, China gets that piece. China, however, on the other hand, said, no, we want it all. And that's the difference. And they're doing that, they've done that in Africa. They're doing that in South America. And I can see them wanting to do that with the Arctic region, take it all. Why wouldn't
listen, I think that's right. And by the way, what do they say? The first rule of ditch digging is when you find yourself in a ditch, you stop digging. Right. So in a lot of these regions, not the Arctic so much, but, Latin America and Africa, what we have as part of the Trump administration's really critical look at foreign aid and really critical look at international development is, I think all of that is totally warranted, but there's also an inherent risk there, right? It's that America's competitiveness and America's profile in these regions goes down. And if you have empty space, whether it's economic or political, it's likely to be filled by America's adversaries like China. And my worry here is that sort of dynamic is going to replicate in the Arctic. We can talk about the Arctic in economic terms, but if we build a fulsome Arctic strategy, it would run counter to what we're doing in places like Africa and Latin America. So it's a pretty heavy lift in political terms.
Hey, Ilan, we have to wrap up here pretty quick. One last question, and that it goes back to the 1960 presidential election. John F. Kennedy talked about a missile gap, okay? And, Richard Nixon was a product of the Eisenhower administration, and he defended our position at that time. Is there a similar situation? Is there a missile gap that we have here? We later found out there really was no missile gap in the 1960s. Do you believe this is a serious gap that we have right now with both China and to some extent Russia in the Arctic?
Well, certainly with regard to Russia, just because Russia has territory that abuts the Arctic, right? Was it a third of Russian territory geographically is in the Arctic? So they're a stakeholder. They're not going anywhere. But with the Chinese, I mean, one of the most interesting conversations that we have here in Washington is that China's the pacing threat. It's the pacing threat. It's the country we have to keep up with regard to space, with regard to technology, with regard to AI. I think that's all true. But I also don't really like that pacing threat frame, because it just means that America's constantly scrambling to catch up. So that missile gap, right? It may exist, it may not exist in the Arctic, but I question the premise of the argument, because my sense is we should have the dominant position in the Arctic, and the Chinese should be trying to catch up with us.
Right.
And right now the situation's reversed.
Ilan Berman, American Foreign Policy Council. How do listeners and viewers here keep up with what you're doing and follow your work?
Sure. Well, they can visit us online at www.afpc.org, and they can follow me at Twitter at Ilan Berman, ILANBERMAN. I'm on that platform, frankly, more than I should be. So,
well, I think we all
join me there. Join me there.
All right. Well, when we return, we'll spend the balance of today's Big Wednesday broadcast with Dr. Daniel Asia, who will explain why American Jews need to change allies. No channel flipping. Thanks, Ilan. You're great.
Thanks,
One of
Ilan.
the smartest guys around. You're watching, listening to Inside Track with Eb and Bruce on the Live the Dream Media Network.
You're listening to Inside Track with Bruce Ash on the Live the Dream Media Network. Now a word from our sponsor.
It's termite season.
Hi, it's me.
And bugs fear the blue trucks from Essential Pest Control.
Go blue at Essential Pest Control. We'll eliminate those bugs, bees, and termites. And stop paying too much to that national provider. Buy local for great service and affordable rates. Call Essential Pest Control, because termites fear the blue.
Run for your life.
Call for the blue trucks from Essential Pest Control. 886-3029. That's 886-3029. Or check online at essentialpest.com.
This is Eb Wilkinson with Wilkinson Wealth Management, where we manage money for gun owners. What does it mean to retire comfortably and remain comfortably retired? It means designing a plan that allows you to do the things you want to do, outpace inflation, and never run out of money in your lifetime. If you want to retire comfortably and remain comfortably retired, call me, Eb Wilkinson, at 777-1911. That's 777-1911, or WilkinsonWealthMGMT.com.
I'm proud to welcome my good friends at Tucson Iron and Metal Retail to Inside Track as an advertiser. Jamie Kipper and her staff are conservation experts. They sell round and square steel tubing, metal plate and roofing materials, as well as new and used steel, aluminum, and stainless steel to ranchers, artists, interior designers, roofers, as well as you do-it-yourselfers out there. Tucson Iron and Metal Retail is open Monday through Fridays, 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., and Saturdays, 8 a.m. to noon. Tucson Iron and Steel Retail, 701 East 36th Street. Call 520-209-1576. That's 520-209-1576, or go to TucsonIronRetail.com. Come by and be sure to ask for Jamie. Tucson Iron and Steel Retail. This is what conservation and repurposing is all about.
Welcome back to Inside Track with Bruce Ash on the Live the Dream Media Network. Now back to our show.
Welcome back to Inside Track with Bruce and Eb. This portion of our show brought to you by my great partner, Eb Wilkinson's company, Wilkinson Wealth Management. Eb helps gun owners with their retirement accounts. He does a great job. I just looked at the figures from last month. Does that kind of a great job for our family, and he'll do the same for your family. Call him today at 520-777-1911. Eb?
Hey, Inside Track is also brought to you by Bruce's 60-year-old commercial real estate company, Paul Ash Commercial Real Estate. They make good things happen every day. We hope you'll call on our good friend Eric Rudin's great team at Essential Pest like I did. You can rely on his Essential Pest pros. Call them at 886-3029 today to protect your home or business from all manner of pests. And finally, if you need steel products for your home, business, ranch, or farm, call Jamie Kipper at Tucson Iron and Metal Surplus. They are Tucson's conservation specialists. Call them at 209-1576 or go to the yard at 701 East 36th Street. You will be amazed at their great products sold at wholesale prices.
Eb and I are pleased to welcome our friend Dr. Dan Asia, retired U of A professor, noted symphony and opera composer, as well as conservative commentator. Thanks for joining us today, Dan. Hello, Dan. Earth to Dan. I think he's back with us.
There he is.
All right. Can you hear us, Dan?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Thanks, Dan. Thanks for joining us. Hey, you retired from the University of Arizona this past May, but you're hardly retired from life. Before we get into today's topic, let's quickly cover the artistic work that you continue to be involved in. Your new opera was performed earlier this summer in New York City. You've been working on a new production for next year. Can I say the title?
Yeah, you can, please.
Okay, Jefferson Lives, which on our 250th anniversary of this country's Declaration of Independence is just so perfect of a title. And talk about the opening that Tin Angel had in New York City, correct?
Yeah, Tin Angel premiered June 28th and June 29th at a wonderful venue called La Mama Experimental Theater. It was started in the 1960s, the mid-1960s, by a black woman seamstress who somehow got the idea that New York needed to have this place. And it was then and it is now considered one of the most important venues in New York City. The reason Stefanos Koronios, the managing director of Teatro Grattacielo, who produced the show, chose it was because it is literally 2 blocks from the bar called the Tin Palace, or where the bar the Tin Palace was in the 70s, on which the opera The Tin Angel is based.
Oh, what a perfect coincidence.
Yeah, so exactly. So it was 20 years in the making. God help me, it wasn't supposed to be that long. We started this before 2008, and then some of our listeners may remember that something momentous happened in 2008 as the world's financial markets almost melted down and came to a halt and stopped, and opera companies went out of business left and right. It made it hard to get a new opera done. Anyway, it's now done, and I can at least mention some good news, but it's not good news quite yet, but that is that the Arizona Opera Company is considering it for production in the future.
Oh, that'd be wonderful.
So wouldn't that be nice that all of my friends and your friends can see it here in Tucson, and all of your buddies up in Phoenix can see it as well?
So now that you've been liberated from academia, have you been,
Yeah.
you're kind of busy commenting on issues of the day. Talk about your recent book review on a new book, The New American Anti-Semitism, titled American Jews Need to Change Allies.
Yeah, the book is written by a wonderful political theorist named Benjamin Ginsberg. Ben teaches at Johns Hopkins University. As he told me, he's probably the only conservative on his faculty, and therefore finds himself in a difficult position. He's written more than 20 books. One of them is the preeminent book in his field. And he is also the child of survivors of the Holocaust. So he has skin in the game, as it were, when it comes to anti-Semitism and the relationship of Jews to, American academia and certainly to the United States. So he wrote this book, and its underlying thesis and conclusion is really rather simple. And that is that the Jews of America have been abandoned by the left. The book is mostly about America, but he also carries this forward to Jewish communities in Europe, and we could talk about that because that certainly plays into the contemporary problems of European and Southern Asian countries now supporting a Palestinian state. But I'm sorry, but back to the general comment or the general thesis, and that is that Jews have always aligned themselves with the left ever since FDR. Even though FDR didn't save Jews by letting them into the United States, he was considered a holy figure by the Jewish community because of his positions towards liberal response to underrepresented communities, Jews being one of them. And he employed Jews, and thereafter um, democratic administrations did the same. And Jews found a welcome place among the governmental elite and the literary and educational elites in the United States as a result. He says over the last 40 years, at least, that has certainly been in the process of change, arriving at the culmination of what we have now, which is vicious anti-Semitism and anti-Israelism expressed in the left community, particularly the progressive democratic community who say the most vile things about Israel, and by extension now Jews as well, because of course both are considered to be oppressive and white, and therefore by definition to be outsiders in the new regime.
Daniel Ebb here. How is it that this diversity and equity and inclusion preached by the left on the college campuses and elsewhere in polite society has morphed into this hatred against Jews under the new popular banner of anti-Zionism? I mean, it's just mind-blowing.
Unfortunately for me, it's not mind-blowing. The extent of it immediately after October 7th caught me by surprise. But for anybody who has been in the academy and who has been looking at this issue as I have for the last 30 years, has not been shocked. It's very, very simple. The history is that the radical left was very clear about its intentions in the late 60s and then going onward, and that was that they were going to create a slow takeover of the major institutions of the United States.
They've done a good job.
They did so. Precisely. They've done a wonderful job. They did it first by taking over academia. How do you take over academia? You put yourself on committees that foster curricular change. You put yourself on the committees to hire new faculty, and you make sure that the only faculty who are hired are those who agree with a liberal leftist agenda. The result has been that whereas 40 years ago, faculty were pretty much largely divided equally between liberal and conservative, you will now find that, particularly in the social sciences and the humanities, that the balance is 95% leftist progressive at the least, and 5%, quote, moderate or who take no positions, and those on the right. So the universities have been completely taken over. They have indoctrinated the students. The result is what you see now in the editorial responses in the New York Times and any other major mainstream media outlet, because they're all populated by 35-year people or younger, 35 years of age or younger people. They have been completely and utterly indoctrinated. They are anti-American and they are anti-Israel. To get back to the central point of your question, how is it that DEI has taken over and what does it mean? Let's put DEI in the context of intersectionality, which our listeners will be less understanding of. But the two essentially say, look, that the primary function now of a university is not to educate our students, but it's to provide a particular environment that will surround them so that they will become used to new ideas. The new ideas are that diversity is the overriding issue in our culture. Forget about education. We simply want diversity of skin color, by the way. Diversity means skin color. It doesn't even mean, from Mr. O'Connor's view of California, who propounded the affirmative or the anti-affirmative action bill there. Forget about rich and poor. That's not even good enough. You can't support the poor. You have to support only poor, Black, Hispanic, BIPOC, LGBTQ people. Those are the people now that matter. It's a complete inversion of what historically has been considered what it is, a meritocracy. that may in fact have favored whites prior to 1960. Since then, of course, we've been a colorblind country, believing that everybody should be judged according to their character. That may sound familiar. That was, of course, Martin Luther King's famous comment that he hoped his children would not be judged by the color of their skin, but by their character. That no longer applies. We have gone way past that. Color now means everything. If you are black, if you are Hispanic, if you are any other color than white, you have been oppressed, and therefore you should be given every benefit that society can possibly offer you. Forget about merit. That's diversity. Diversity inclusive means that everybody is to be included, but it means more than that. It means that you flatten out the world and you forget about meritocracy, and everybody is supposed to be given everything simply according to their personhood in all aspects of the world. Now that's fundamentally opposed, of course, everything in education, which is, sorry, some people do better and some people don't do so well. Does that mean that somebody who shouldn't go to college is a lesser person? Of course not. It just means they might not be college material and they should become a plumber and make 150 grand a year, which is twice the amount that any professor in the School of Music makes at the University of Arizona. Okay? So they're not doing badly.
Yeah, my stepson is a physics professor at American River College in California. And I will tell you that your number of 95.5, it's greater than that. He said there are very few fellow conservatives on campus, and they have to have this dark, closeted network in order to communicate so they can, just get through. And the student population is the same, by the way, at those college campuses.
They track one another like magnets.
It is. It's ridiculous. Well, watching what happened right after October 2nd or 7th, and let's use the U of A as an example. I didn't realize the amount of hatred and bigotry was still at the University of Arizona until October 7th took over. What the hell happened? What opened these floodgates, and why does the university allow that to happen?
Because nobody's in charge. Nobody has been in charge. Nobody's fought back. Presidents have simply come in and accepted the situation, collected their $1 million a year, and gone about their way until they retire with a good amount of money in the bank. Why would you want to create an adverse condition if you're a professor amongst all of your faculty, right? With the exception of maybe the School of Mining and some of your scientists. So they choose the easy way out. They're not like President Silberman at Boston University, where when students decided they wanted to demonstrate, he took a fire hose on them, and that was the end of the demonstration because he said, enough already, get back and study. Nobody will do that. It took our president, Robbins, 2 times to get it right. He finally did, and I thank him for that. But before that was happening in the School of Education, teachers were using their classroom time to talk about why this was a justified action on the part of Hamas with their students and ridiculing any students who opposed them. Were they reprimanded? They were given a slight slap on the hand. Were they fired? No. They, of course, should have been fired. And every professor who indoctrinates his students and or uses his class as a political platform rather than teaching the materials that should be taught in the class, and by the way, teaching them from a non-political standpoint, should be fired. But they won't be. And by the way, this won't happen unless the federal government does just what it's doing, because universities are incapable of reforming themselves now by themselves.
Dan, talk about Mr. Ginsburg's statement that Marxism has long been hostile to Jews and why that's important to know today.
Well, Marxist ideology is not recognized by the general public. It is rampant again in the university, particularly in social science departments and economic departments. The fact that they've been able to take the place of more mainstream economists is a travesty of our system. But again, it goes back, you hire one, and Marxism is not just an economic ideology, it's one about how to take over the world, right? So if you can't take over the world, what you do is you take over your department. How do you do it? Next time a nice conservative economist retires, you make sure you hire a Marxist economist. So what's the problem? Marxism is at the center, or is the bedrock, if you will, of the creation of DEI and then intersectionality. What intersectionality essentially states is that any oppressed people should support any other oppressed people. Therefore, you have gay societies supporting Hamas because they support the Palestinians in their supposed goal of emancipation from the occupation. Now, they're too stupid to know that if they were in Gaza, they would be thrown off the top of a building and murdered because they're gay. Doesn't make any difference to them because they don't know that. But therefore, you have intersectionality of all those oppressed. So think of this as now subcategories of the workers and the workers uniting to overthrow their capitalist oppressors. So in this case, it's not the capitalist oppressors, it's the occupying oppressors. It's the colonialist oppressors. It has morphed from being purely an economic theory into a world theory that holds all colonialists, and therefore, and who were the colonialists? They were whites. Why is America bad? Because of the 1619 Project. We brought slavery into this country, and that was the primary ethos of the United States, was to create a new place for slavery.
Mr. Ginsburg wrote in his new book, while the left insists that it's anti-Zionism, opposition to Jewish national homeland is not anti-Semitism, which is the hatred of Jews. Ginsburg says that can only be established by answering three critical questions. Number one, does a punitively anti-Zionist group or individual make use of a well-established anti-Semitic imagery and tropes or comments on Jews, specifically when censoring Israel? Is it evidence proffered by no malice towards Jews proportionate to vehemence towards Israel? And what evidence do anti-Zionists offer to deny being anti-Semites? Why doesn't the American left believe that Jews who've been kicked out of every Arab-speaking country don't deserve a Jewish homeland, which goes back over 4 millennia?
In a simple statement, because they don't give a damn about Jews. Okay? Anti-Semitism has been just as you stated, anti-Semitism has been a plague upon civilization for at least 2,000 years. It's the most ancient hatred that we know of, and it has continued throughout societies in the West for many years. It is irrational, as most hatreds are, that take their hatred to one particular people, and rather than placing it on those who commit evil, somehow suggest that a whole people can in fact be evil. So what Ginsburg is stressing is that those principles that should apply generally around the world about bad things are applied exclusively to the Jews. And then, of course, you get the inversion of language from Nazis to Jews. The greatest of those now is the use of the word genocide for the war in Gaza. Genocide has a very specific meaning. It means you try to eradicate a people. It has been used only for a number of situations, of course, the most important, the Holocaust. So the fact that the left now has inverted that comment to be used against the only Jewish state in the world is perhaps one of the most horrific upending uses of language imaginable. If Israel were committing genocide, every Palestinian would have been gunned down by now in Gaza. Quite the contrary. And then, of course, we know that that Hamas is starving hostages, just as the Nazis did in Germany and throughout their occupied Eastern European areas, and in fact made them dig their own graves before shooting them and
Yeah.
having them fall into the grave. And thus, the picture that we see of Hamas is a Nazi redo, an absolute Nazi redo. Has anybody commented on that or said that in the New York Times? I don't believe so. I haven't seen it yet.
So Dan, why is it that so many American Jews, notwithstanding what we've discussed here, what you just talked about so clearly, why is it that American Jews continue to support the left, their issues and candidates, and why aren't there many outspoken Democrat leaders who actually say that they reject anti-Semitism? They're mute on the issue.
There's one fundamental reason, it seems to me, and this applies, by the way, both to the Democratic Party here in the United States, and it applies to the cowardly behavior of the leaders of France and Germany. The Muslim population in the United States now far outnumbers the Jewish population.
Yeah.
They wish to appeal to that voting body. France has a huge problem with its huge Muslim and fundamentalist Islamic Muslim population who are terribly anti-Semitic, but they form a large voting bloc in both of those countries. I have a friend in London who left London 5 years ago because she said she was tired of getting into a cab and being proselytized by a Muslim cab driver. So there are areas in England and in France that the police won't go because they know that they're subject to violence and perhaps being killed.
No-go zones.
So, exactly, no-go zones. So a friend here left the University of Michigan. Why? Because the anti-Semitism of the Muslim population in Dearborn was too much for him to take. So until this is called out and until the Democrats decide they don't want, they're willing to upset that large voting bloc, nothing's going to happen. And let's state it very clearly. What are the Democrats most interested in? They're interested in power and retaining power and controlling the governmental bureaucracy. They want it, and they want it larger. Republicans, we tend to be a peculiar sort. We get into power and then we start getting rid of government so there's less to control. What a weird idea. What a weird idea. Anyway, so that's what Jews, now where are Jews in all of this? Ginsburg states something very, very, very funny, I think. He says, Jews, even secular Jews, many of them, they wouldn't imagine converting out. Some have become Unitarians, some have become Quakers, yes, but mostly they just slide into the general secular society. The idea of I'm sorry?
They just eat pastrami and eggs and think that's Jewish.
Exactly. So the idea of conversion from one political party to another is also anathema to them. And it's been so ingrained in most Jews that they're Democrats, that's their expression of Judaism. To abandon that would be to perhaps to leave behind the last vestige of what they consider to be their Jewishness, in as much as they believe that the left's values almost completely overlap with what they consider to be Jewish values.
Dan,
Yeah.
We have to close up for today. We're up against the end of the show time. Before we close up, though, you've been involved with the Center for American Culture and Ideas. How do our viewers and listeners find more about this center?
Oh, thank you so much. But I have to update you. We've changed our name, folks. Our name is, you're not going to be able to pronounce it. It's called Polyhymnia. And that's where you go. Polyhymnia, just the way it sounds. Poly, like, and then what's a hymnia? I don't know what's a hymnia. It's like a
the Catholic Church you go to sing.
There you go. There you go. And that's exactly it. It's the Greek goddess of music and rhetoric. And since we're no longer at the university, we decided to hell with that. We're not a center anymore. We want to advance American culture and American arts. And please find us at polyhymnia.org. It's that simple, www.polyhymnia.org. Send oodles of money because someone who was supporting us to the tune of $100,000 stopped their commitment because they thought we were too Western centric and because they thought we might somehow be aligned with the Trump government. It's an example of Trump derangement syndrome. So we need to replace that dough. So be generous, send money, support Jefferson Lives. You'll see it in Tucson, you'll see it in New York, and we're going to get it around to lots of other cities in the United States.
Dr. Dan Asia, distinguished composer and political observer. That's going to do it for today's show. Thanks for joining us this morning for your message to American Jews and all Americans. Many thanks to Ilan Berman, who briefed us about America versus China's Arctic policy. Join us next week when Republican nominee for Tucson City Council, Jay Tolkoff, a very interesting man, joins us, as well as friend of the show, Donald Smith, about the cruelty of DEI policies at the Department of Defense. Eb?
All of our Inside Track podcasts are available on Live the Dream Media's Facebook page, YouTube, Spotify, Instagram, and X. Thanks for joining us today. Until next week when we return, this is Eb Wilkinson
and Bruce Ash.
Wishing you all a good day. Be sure to join us again in 167 hours.
Be there.
You're listening to Inside Track with Bruce Ash on the Live the Dream Media Network. Now a word from our sponsor.
It's termite season.
Hi, it's me.
And bugs fear the blue trucks from Essential Pest Control.
Go blue at Essential Pest Control. We'll eliminate those bugs, bees, and termites. And stop paying too much to that national provider. Buy local for great service and affordable rates. Call Essential Pest Control because termites fear the blue.
Run for your life.
Call for the blue trucks from Essential Pest Control. 886-3029. That's 886-3029. Or check online at essentialpest.com.
This is Eb Wilkinson with Wilkinson Wealth Management, where we manage money for gun owners. What does it mean to retire comfortably and remain comfortably retired? It means designing a plan that allows you to do the things you want to do, outpace inflation, and never run out of money in your lifetime. If you want to retire comfortably and remain comfortably retired, call me, Eb Wilkinson, at 777-1911. That's 777-1911 or WilkinsonWealthMGMT.com.
I'm proud to welcome my good friends at Tucson Iron and Metal Retail to Inside Track as an advertiser. Jamie Kipper and her staff are conservation experts. They sell round and square steel tubing, metal plate and roofing materials, as well as new and used steel, aluminum, and stainless steel to ranchers, artists, interior designers, roofers, as well as you do-it-yourselfers out there. Tucson Iron and Metal Retail is open Monday through Fridays, 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., and Saturdays, 8 a.m. to noon. Tucson Iron and Steel Retail, 701 East 36th Street. Call 520-209-1576. That's 520-209-1576. Or go to TucsonIronRetail.com. Come by and be sure to ask for Jamie. Tucson Iron and Steel Retail. This is what conservation and repurposing is all about.